we have edited our pictures in Lightroom, what we need to do is then open them in Photoshop so that we can start to view them and change them and edit them a little bit to actually create our either focal stack images or image stitched or image stitching or composite images. So once we've decided that once we've gone through, edited the colors in Lightroom, and we're ready to kind of combine our pictures, right? Here I have image 8, 9, 10, and 11, which I want to stitch together to create a picture that kind of encapsulates the entire tower here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the first one, and then I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the last one, and it will select all of them. And here I'm going to right click and go to Edit in Adobe Photoshop. Now there's two different ways to do this, and it really depends on what your goals are at the end of the day. Whether you want to edit in Photoshop or you want to open as layers in Photoshop. But for this specific thing, whenever we're doing photo stitching, we want to edit in Photoshop, not open as layers. So we're going to click the Edit in Photoshop button, and then Photoshop's going to pop up. It's going to take a little bit of time to kind of process these images. So here, my images have opened, and you'll notice that they're each opened as their own individual file, right? So that's the difference between opening as layers when you have one file with multiple layers, or opening or editing in Photoshop. So I have all my images. I'm pretty happy with all of them. They look great. I'm going to go to File, Automate, and then I'm going to go down to Photo Merge. And here we have a couple different options. We have the Auto, Perspective, etc., Reposition. Now, Auto is going to let the computer's machine learning kind of problem solve its way through blending these images together. While Reposition is the least destructive. It's not going to distort your images in any way. It's just going to merge them together. All right, so I always start with the Reposition because it's the least destructive, and then if that doesn't work, then I can use some of these other options. But I encourage you to kind of play around and explore all of them. And then here, for your source files, which files would you like to photo merge? You can either go to Browse and you can find them in your Finder, or you can go here to Add Open Files. And so each of my files are open here, so I'm going to click on Add Open Files. And you'll see that they're kind of listed. Everything looks great. I'm going to press OK. The computer's going to take a while to think about it. It's going to be a long kind of process. Sometimes it takes longer than other times. Other times it works really well. And so you'll see here that it has photos stitched together. However, my tower is a little bit crooked, which is not how it looks in real life. And so sometimes this is what happens when you don't do when you use the Reposition tool and you're asking it to not be destructive to the images. Sometimes it doesn't work quite the right way. All right, so I'm going to save this just in case it helps in the future. Maybe this falls into the category of magic realism. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm saving it in my Art 344 in a new folder for Project 2. And here, I'm going to make sure that I name it that I give it a name that's descriptive, that I understand what I'm doing, what is happening. All right, that will be really helpful. And then, of course, I always want to save this a couple different ways. I like saving things as both TIFFs, JPEGs, and Photoshop files. That way, I've got a little bit of everything if I need it. So once I saved my crooked tower, I went ahead and I closed that file, and I'm going to try the photo merge again. And this time I'm going to use the auto setting and hope that that kind of fixes that kind of crookedness. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click auto. I'm going to add open files, and I'm going to press OK. And I'm just going to see if this thing solves the problem this time. So once again, it might take a little time. Get a cup of coffee, relax. You're going to have to wait a little bit. So here it seems like it worked a little bit, and you can tell that it slightly distorted the images because it kind of tucked in the sides here, which is fine. We can work with that, right? And you'll see here that it's actually created these interesting masks of each of the or of each layer, of each of these images. So it's taken a little bit of the top, a little bit in the middle, a little bit of the side, so on and so forth. And so once again, it's also not a destructive technique that's happening here. But, it does make for a funky photograph when we've got these kind of fold in sides here. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fix that using the content aware fill. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new layer, and you're going to do this every time you add new information. And we're going to select this empty void of the gray and white checkers with a little bit of the existing image. And we're going to go to Edit, Content Aware, Fill. And this will take a long time to process too, right? A lot of this, we're asking our computer to do some pretty heavy work here. So just make sure you give it some time and you just kind of wait it out. So here, the most important thing, I think, is the color adaptation, right? It's either going to be none, default, high, or very high. I start with the very high, right? And then I work my way down. Sometimes the very high is great, sometimes it's not. It really depends on what you are trying to content aware fill. So I encourage you to experiment with different things and try different things. If one thing doesn't work, try a different option. Make sure that you put output to a current layer or a new layer, because you don't want this to exist on the same space as your original files. Or like you don't want it to happen on this layer. You want it to happen on a separate layer. So make sure you press current layer or new layer. So here is what it's predicting the outcome to look like, right? Here's what it looked like before, kind of empty and void, and now it's filled it in, and it looks pretty convincing to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna press OK, and it's gonna take a while. So I'm just gonna speed through this kind of awkward pause, thinking about it. I think that might be the end of this video. It's just a minute of waiting. And so what I've done is I've done the content aware fill for all the different chunks of this, and it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to turn off, and I have a new individual layer for each part of the content aware fill, as you'll see here. And then I go back to the original image. So it's really important that you put these on different layers and that you have them on new separate layers from your original images so that we can always delete them or get rid of them if we don't like them. And it looks pretty good. For the most part, I feel very convinced by it, but the content aware sometimes can add some distortion. Like if we look here at this image, I see some distortion happening here. And then over here, we've lost part of the railing, and these stairs are starting to look a little fuzzy. So the content aware is nice for small bits of information, but overall, I feel like the less we can use it, the better. It's good for emergencies, but not always. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna crop this picture down to include less of the content aware and more of the actual image, but it's gonna be pretty hard to do that without having some content aware fill in there. So I'm just gonna crop it down, make it look really nice. It's gonna take some time. And then I can go ahead and I can turn on all these layers. And I think this looks like there's some pretty minimal content aware. This is my only major area of concern here. The sky looks pretty great. So here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to crop. So I've already cropped this image down. I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm going to deselect it. I'm going to turn on all my content aware fills. And then the major area of concern is once again that kind of lower corner there, right? Where we've got these funky things happening with the railings. And so this is a great opportunity to learn about the clone stamp. So the clone stamp does exactly what it sounds like it's going to do. By clicking over an image and pressing Option, make sure you're on the right layer to do this. If you hold Option and click on a spiral of an image, what you're doing is you're producing a clone. And then you click, again, without holding Option, to stamp that same image in a different location. So I encourage you to try out the clone stamp. Here I pressed Option and clicked. And then you'll notice that all of a sudden I have a little stamp of that piece of the railing. And so this allows me to kind of copy and paste and produce several different railings, which becomes really nice. So I can kind of add new chunks into this railing. And so it's helpful to make sure, like, one, make sure you're on the right layer, make sure it looks good. You can do this a couple times. The only thing to be concerned about is like it's reproducing some information that becomes pretty obvious, right? That it's reproduced. So you want to make sure that you're going back in and editing things as necessary to really kind of sell people on the idea and really convince them of the reality of this. So I fixed that railing. That railing looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go in with the lasso tool and kind of delete some of this extra information just so it looks really convincing. So then I'm going to kind of zoom out. Here, I'm going to use the clone stamp to stamp some of this grass and to really kind of convince people of this. Really make it obvious that this is what I'm doing. And you have to make sure you're on the right layer to do this. Otherwise, it's just not going to, like, you know, if you're on the wrong layer and there's no information to clone, it can't do it. So you have to make sure you're working with the right information and the right layer. So it gets a little confusing, but I'm able to go through there and kind of clone stamp out that weird feeling that it added and really start to make this look pretty good. So it looks okay. I feel like this part of the railing I'm still not super convinced by. Like, it still looks a little funky to me, and I can continue to work on it to really make that edge look great. But overall, I'm pretty satisfied with this, and I'll probably end up cropping that out given the fact of the dimensions right now. This is over 30 by almost 40 here. So, you know, there's lots of room for me to play with kind of cropping this down. So here, you know, I have my final image. I'm feeling good about it. And I'm going to go ahead and crop it down because our final images need to be 18 by 12 or 12 by 18. So I'm going to go to Image, Image Size. And then here, I'm going to choose whatever dimension's larger and make it 18. And then I'm going to make sure that I change my resolution to 300, right, per the restrictions on this assignment. It's going to take some time. More time waiting. And there we have it. I have an image that's just over, that's 18 inches tall. Looks pretty good, but it's over 12 inches wide here. So I'm going to go to canvas size. And image size and canvas size are different. Image size scales your image up or down. Canvas size cuts the board down. And so you'll see kind of the difference here, that we were able to shrink an image from 38 inches tall to 18 inches tall. And here what we're going to do is we're going to change the proportions, right? So the anchor is really important because the anchor is telling it, okay, this is your base point, and then make all the changes outward from there. So I'm going to click on the right to be my base point, and I'm going to make it 13 inches because I don't want to lose more than half an inch on this side, given that this image starts here, right? We have this nice kind of gate around the tower, and I think that's really important. So I'm going to use that as that point, and I'm going to clip it in from this side. And you'll notice that I lose all that kind of clone stamping over here, which is probably for the best because it didn't look that convincing. I wasn't super convinced by it. But this image is still slightly too big. It needs to be 12, not 13. So I'm going to go back to the canvas size, and I'm going to go back and forth with my anchor here and really kind of narrow this down so that I'm happy with what I'm looking at. And there, I kind of cut it in, and I'm going to continue to do this process a couple of times just until I get like the absolute perfect image here. Hold on one second. Let me make this big. Sorry. Okay. So then once I'm really satisfied with it and I think it looks great, I'm going to go to Save As. And I'm going to make sure that I save it as a Photoshop PST. Double check your color profile here. Make sure that we name this, something that we're going to remember. Our final projects, our final thing should always be labeled first name, last name, project 2, project 3, project 1, etc. So go ahead and press save. Sounds great. And then once it's done saving, we're going to go back and we're going to save it again. I always recommend that we save everything a million times. That way we can just double check that everything, we have backups for everything. So now that we've saved it as a Photoshop, I'm going to go in and I'm going to save it as a JPEG to ensure that nothing bad happens, that I have copies of all of my work in case something goes wrong. So first name, last name, project 2. Easy. So you'll go ahead and press OK, and then you'll get this menu that shows up here. And here, we don't want to go with the extra large files because we need to be able to move these across the internet. So we're going to just work with the quality 9 high. All right, nothing bigger, nothing smaller. Quality 9 high should be just fine. And we'll press OK. And then once that's done saving, we're going to save this for the web so that we can use this in our digital portfolio. So we're going to go to File, Export, Save for Web. And here, we're going to make sure we're at PNG 24 up here, and then we're going to change our image size to 2500. Here, it's really important that you press Save and not Done. I can't tell you how many times I've pressed Done, and it's done nothing. The Done button doesn't do anything. You have to press Save. And then once you press Save, it will bring up this menu, and you'll tell it where to locate it. In our digital portfolio folder. Make sure you name it first name, last name, project 2, PNG. And then you press save, and it will go ahead and save it.